Hi, it's Veronica Nye, Senior Economist at TFI. Thanks very much for joining me today. Before we get on to the topic of the day, which is going to be the landfall of Milton and its impact on the fertilizer industry, I do want to make an announcement about a very exciting speaker that we've added to the TFI Market Logistics Conference, which is coming up November 18th through 20th in Tampa. We've added Nate Kaufman, who is the leading expert for the Federal Reserve on the ag economy. He's going to be speaking Tuesday morning about ag finance, and it will surely be an incredibly informative talk. And I'm sure we'll hear fertilizer mentioned more than once. As we're talking about Tampa, of course, everyone's been talking about the landfall of Hurricane Milton that is expected to have a significant impact on Florida, in particular the Tampa area. That hurricane is expected to make landfall late Wednesday evening, early Thursday morning. And it's of particular significance to the fertilizer industry because around the Tampa area, we have a significant amount of production of phosphate fertilizers, significant to the tune of over 40% of ammonium phosphate production occurs around the Tampa area. 32% of phosphate rock capacity is in that area, and over 50% of wet processed phosphoric acid production is all in that Tampa area and could potentially be impacted. Now, it's also worth noting that these facilities certainly were impacted by Hurricane Helene. And so this is, Milton is making landfall in a very similar area. We're seeing similarly impacted facilities. Growers will certainly tell you that MAP and DAP prices have been those that have been the most sticky to come down from the 2021, 2022 highs. And certainly the impact of these hurricanes are going to continue to lead to elevated phosphate prices for the foreseeable future. Now, beyond just the production of phosphates, which again is incredibly significant, but we have to also think about the impact on the Port of Tampa. So about 25% of all U.S. fertilizer exports go out through the Port of Tampa. You won't be surprised, given that there's a lot of production of phosphate fertilizer in the Tampa area, that it is the Port of Tampa is particularly important to phosphate fertilizer exports, with over 40% of all U.S. phosphate exports occurring through Tampa. As we kind of go through the year and think about what the hurricane making landfall at this particular juncture, what that means on a month-by-month basis. If we just look at 2023, we see that in the month of October, about 3% of phosphate exports went out. In November, 9% of phosphate exports went out in that month. And in December, 8% of phosphate exports went out in that month. So over the last 3 months, the last quarter of 2023, over 20% of U.S. phosphate fertilizer exports occurred during those 3 months. So certainly this is a challenging time for the Port of Tampa to be impacted so significantly. I don't want to predict any doom. There's lots of weather folk who are able to do that. But certainly we're all keeping the fertilizer industry and all the inhabitants of Tampa and Florida at large in our thoughts, and hope that the damage to life and property is very small. And from a fertilizer perspective, that those shutdowns of facilities are pretty limited, and that production will continue pretty quickly after the storm has passed. But again, looking at some fairly significant portion of phosphate production potentially impacted by Milton. So unfortunately, not a lot of great news in this update today, but wanted to make sure that folks were aware of the significance that this could have in the short term and in the medium to long term on phosphate fertilizer availability and prices in the U.S. So thanks very much. Hopefully when we're together again next week, we can talk a little bit about the impacts, and maybe the impact won't be as significant as it appears that it might be at this particular juncture. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.